The Galactic Council's emergency session had been called within hours of the first reports. Ambassador Zethkara's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession as she processed the incoming data streams from the Outer Rim territories. The readings were impossible yet undeniable. The Devourer swarm has been stopped? Council Prime Veltar's voice carried across the crystalline chamber, his uncertainty echoing off the walls. Not stopped, Zethkara corrected, her tentacles dancing nervously over her communication console. Eliminated completely, every single bioship, every hive cluster, every spawning ground gone. The chamber fell silent. The Devourer swarm had been the galaxy's nightmare for 3 millennia. Entire star systems had been consumed, civilizations reduced to organic matter to fuel their endless hunger. The Council's greatest military minds had calculated it would take the combined fleets of 50 worlds to even slow their advance. Who? The question came from a dozen species simultaneously. Zethkara's display flickered to life, showing grainy footage from a survivor probe. The humans. A collective shudder ran through the assembly. Humanity, the barely spacefaring species that had been granted provisional membership just 2 cycles ago. The ones whose homeworld reeked of violence and whose history was written in blood. The Council had debated for months whether to even acknowledge their existence. Impossible, muttered Kardesh, the hegemony's military advisor. They possess perhaps 30 vessels capable of interstellar travel. The swarm numbered in the millions. The footage began to play. What the assembled delegates saw defied every tactical doctrine, every understanding of civilized warfare they possessed. The human fleet had not engaged in the standard formation-based combat favored by galactic militaries. Instead, they had done something no rational species would attempt. They had boarded the bioships. While their vessels engaged the swarm's attention, teams of humans in primitive atmospheric suits had cut their way inside the living vessels. "Look at their faces," whispered Zethkara, enhancing the image quality. "Do you see fear?" The delegates stared at the human warriors moving through the organic corridors of the bioships. Their faces were visible through transparent helmets, and what they saw chilled them to their cores. There was no terror, no hesitation, only a cold, implacable determination that seemed to burn behind their binocular eyes. "They're not fighting for territory," observed the ethereal collective's representative, her gaseous form swirling with confused patterns. "They're not fighting for resources or strategic advantage." Another clip played, a human soldier surrounded by swarm warriors twice his size, refusing to retreat even as his weapon ran dry. He detonated something on his belt, taking a dozen enemies with him. His final transmission was barely audible. "Tell Sarah I kept my promise." "Who is Sarah?" asked Veltar. Zethkara had been investigating this question for hours. According to human records, Sarah Morrison, age 7, the soldier's daughter. She lives on a colony world in the path of the swarm's advance. The implications hit the assembly like a shockwave. These humans weren't fighting as soldiers following orders or defending abstract principles. They were fighting as parents, as siblings, as beings who saw something worth dying for in the faces of their young. More footage streamed in. A human female, covered in the acidic blood of swarm creatures carrying wounded civilians to safety while singing what appeared to be a lullaby. A group of human engineers who had somehow reprogrammed swarm biotechnology to turn against itself, sacrificing their own lives to create a cascade failure that destroyed an entire hive cluster. They weaponized their own biology, Kardesh reported with horrified fascination. The swarm's adaptation protocols couldn't process human genetic material. Every time the swarm consumed human tissue, it became confused, conflicted. Some bioships actually began attacking their own kind. Because they saw monsters, Zethkara realized, her voice barely above a whisper. When the swarm consumed humans, it absorbed something it had never encountered before. The genetic memory of a species that had looked at impossible odds and chosen to fight anyway. Not for conquest, not for survival, but for love. The final clip showed the aftermath. The human fleet, or what remained of it, limping back toward their space. Of the 40,000 humans who had participated in the battle, fewer than 8,000 remained. They should have been celebrating their impossible victory. Instead, they were mourning their dead. The transmission from the human flagship reached the council chambers minutes later. Admiral Chen, her uniform torn and stained, looked directly into the camera with those strange, Forward-facing eyes, Council Prime Veltar. This is Admiral Lisa Chen of the Human Defense Force. The Devourer swarm has been neutralized. All hive clusters have been destroyed, and we've confirmed the elimination of their breeding population. The threat to galactic civilization has ended. She paused, and for a moment something vulnerable flickered across her features. We know what the galaxy thinks of us. We know our reputation. But when something threatens our children, our families, our future, we don't become monsters. We become something far more dangerous. We become humans who have something to protect. The transmission ended, leaving the council chamber in absolute silence. It was the ethereal collective's representative who spoke first, her gaseous form now glowing with newfound respect. Perhaps we have misunderstood the nature of monsters. Zethkara nodded slowly, her tentacles finally still. The swarm saw monsters and tried to consume them. But they weren't monsters at all. They were something the swarm couldn't comprehend. Beings capable of choosing love over survival, sacrifice over safety. Veltar's ancient voice carried across the chamber with new gravity. Begin immediate preparations for full membership status for the human species, and send our condolences for their losses. As the council dispersed, one thought echoed through every delegate's mind. In a galaxy full of predators and prey, humanity had revealed themselves to be neither. They were guardians, and that made them the most terrifying force the universe had ever known. After all, what could be more frightening than someone who had everything to lose, and the will to fight for it?